Okay, so you were in the Navy from what, 61 or 62?
61 to 65. 4 years, 3 months, 21 days, 23 hours, and 50 minutes on active duty. Okay? They sent me to schools in electronic, and I got 24 hours at college credit for the schools they sent me to. It was, I got basic electronics, avionics, anti-submarine warfare, and how to operate a bunch of equipment. And then at the last year, the first school I went to was 38 weeks. At the end of that 38 weeks, I had 13 weeks of anti-submarine warfare technology. And because I was high up on my academic credentials, they let me pick where I wanted to go for duty. Well, if I went to Okinawa, they had a little asterisk by Okinawa, and I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And they said that means 19 more weeks at San Diego with an electrical engineer. And no, that wasn't it. That was just these special schools. So then, after I got into the squadron, I got selected for Project Ear Trumpet, which was a deal with 6 guys were selected out of the Pacific Fleet to go with a squadron, take a squadron up to Adak, Alaska, and chase Russian submarines in the Pacific. And it's called Project Ear Trumpet. And that required us to go sit down with an engineer for 19 weeks and learn about some special top secret equipment. So
What was that called? Was that the Jezebel thing? Or the,
yeah,
okay.
they called that was a code name for it, Jezebel. But anyway, I had that 19 weeks at San Diego, 13 weeks of special something else, and then 38 weeks of basic, 4 weeks of aviation training. So, and then I had 3 weeks of survival, escape, and evasion because we were flying over Russia. So if you put that matched up to my time on active duty, I spent well over half of my 4 years in college type schools. So when I was getting ready to leave the Navy, I had to go in for my exit interview. And the guy called me and sat me down and had my records in front of him. And he said, "I'm not even going to try to talk you into re-enlisting." Because he said, nobody ever gets this much training in one. And he said, there's nothing we could offer you that would equal that. So we just sat there and told sea stories to each other, and that was it. And I left and dragged my sea bag out of there. And as I was dragging my sea bag out, I noticed it was 10 to 1. And it was 1 o'clock when I had sworn into the Navy. And that 10 minutes was the 50 minutes on the end of that. When I said 4 years, 3 months, 21 days, 23 hours, and 50 minutes. So it liked 50 minutes being another day.
Now, what you flew in a P2V?
I had about 2,000 flight hours in a P2V. That's a Neptune. And then when I went up to Alaska, it was in a P3V, which is the Orion. And I had about 1,000 hours in those.
And what did you guys do when y'all were flying? Y'all were flying over mainland China or flying up and down the Chinese coast?
Well, that was before Project Ear Trumpet. We flew out of Okinawa, down the Formosa Straits, looped around Taiwan, and then back up. And we would look for submarines to chase. And we would also have our electronic countermeasures to listen to the Chinese radars. And whenever we picked up one, sometimes we'd fly inland and take pictures of the site. We'd fly down the radio waves to get right to the radar site. And so anyway, all that was top secret stuff, and it was all the stuff we did was mail it to the Chief of Naval Operations. Now, when I was in Alaska with Project Ear Trumpet, with his Chief of Naval Operations, we sent everything to him, boy. I mean, all the stuff we did. And one time we flew over Petropavlovsk Harbor and dropped sonobuoys in the harbor. Now Petropavlovsk is the only year-round harbor they have, and all the subs go in there. Not all of them, but most of them. And one time we flew in there and dropped sonobuoys in right next to a Soviet nuclear submarine. And I was listening on the underwater sounds, and you could hear the microphone or hydrophone they call it banging against when the sonobuoy was banging against the hull of the submarine. And then you heard them pulling the hydrophone up and heard a bunch of Russian language. They were all discussing what this was, and they were just talking to us because it was a microphone. And after about 5 minutes, all of a sudden somebody came running down the ship and hollering at them, and came running up and just tore the thing out of their hands and tore it up. So that was kind of good. We sent that to the Chief of Naval Operations too.
And didn't you? Your main, really the only defensive weapon you guys had on the P2 or the P3 or where was your nuclear depth charge?
Yeah, we could carry 2 nuclear depth charges and 5-inch rockets on each wing. So did I say that right? There's five rockets on each wing.
Okay, and then 2 depth charges.
Yeah.
And what was it, like 20 kiloton or what was
No, it was about 1 or 2 kiloton. It was about the size of the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki bombs.
And that was to dispatch any submarines that, if something were to fight and come to blows,
we could blow them out of the water. The deal was these nuclear depth charges had various depth settings that you could program from the flight deck, and they would blow up a cubic mile sphere that had about a 1 mile radius, and just completely destroy that seawater in a cubic mile. And when it crushed back, when they destroyed the water, the ocean would collapse back together. Well, if you have a mile bubble and your submarine's in that bubble, it gets flattened by all the water crashing back against it. So they were a pretty good depth charge, and we could carry 2 of them.
Now, was that top secret, or was?
Oh yeah.
And did they keep it shrouded when they?
Oh yeah.
And had to put it took it on and off the aircraft with.
Well, one night in Okinawa, we armed. They called it a Lulu, and we armed a Lulu and flew a mission with an armed atomic depth charge. And it was what they call an ORI, Organizational Readiness Investigation. And we had some guest lieutenant commander flying with us to make sure we did everything right. And we flew a mission on that thing, and then flew back. When we went to the deal, the first thing you do, you have a cranking the nuclear bomb up in the shackles up there, and there's a procedure you go through, a checklist to make sure all the things are right. One guy's up in the flight deck reading stuff up there off, and you're telling him what you're reading down below. And all the crew members have a different job to make sure it all gets done right. So you gotta. Well, anyway, we drove over there about 2 o'clock in the morning to fly this mission, and when we came up to our airplane, it was sitting on the tarmac with spotlights showing all around it, 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was just ringed completely around with Marines with little machine guns. And because this was top secret, man, we're really doing something fancy. And I remember that the encounter password was Gilbert and Sullivan. And they say Gilbert, you'd say Sullivan, then it lets you go through. But that was kind of exciting. We were all feeling really like big shots, you know, riding in the back of a pickup, and then all the crew got out and went to our positions and loaded up this atomic depth charge.
Now, what was it when you guys would fly in and drop radar chaff?
Do what?
When you'd fly in?
Oh, one time we were flying one of those, it was called a Yankee flight, where we went around the Formosa and came back. And this was the kind where you came down, that'd be a clockwise. They called it a Yankee clockwise. And you'd go around, and we were sitting in a Quonset hut waiting for the plane to be gassed up and all to go back. And I had been downtown in Formosa, Taiwan. I was in Tainan, Taiwan. And I found on the black market some chaff, and it's a box about this big. And it's tinfoil strips, packed just solid. It's real heavy. And you throw it out the window of the airplane, and it hits the air, and it just blows it everywhere. And they're cut to quarter wavelength lengths of this to different radars. So regardless of what radar was picking up our airplane flying in, they would think there's a lot of them. And so I was talking to our commander, the flight guy, and I talked him into flying about 50 feet off the water, okay, and getting that P2V up to about 400 knots is what the top speed was, when you had both jets going and both propellers going. And so I said, fly in at about 50 feet off the water and get the thing up as high, as fast as it'll go, and you start going up at an angle. And I'll take the radar and put it on sector scan, high PRF. And when you do that, it looks, when their electronic countermeasures pick it up, the high PRF makes you think it's a fire control radar.
Like someone's attacking them.
Yeah, and the fact that we were rising, coming up like that, would appear to be faster than we really were. And so they'd think it's some jets or something coming out of
and a whole bunch of them.
Taiwan, a whole bunch of them. And so they would turn on all their radars to try to find out for sure what we were. Well,
so you throw the chaff out the window? And
yeah, our ordnanceman back in the back, they had to decide when he could just throw the stuff out. And his name was Popesky. And we got Popesky to throw that stuff out as we were rising up. And boy, just blew it all over the South China Sea there. And so anyway, I was at the Julie position, and next door to me was a ECM guy. And when we threw that chaff out, all of a sudden, all kinds of radars lit up all over China, trying to see what was going on. And we were recording everything that came in on the ECM gear, which was also top secret. But anyway, we recorded all that stuff, and then we got back to our base, and we were met on the tarmac by the commanding officer of the squadron, and he wanted us to give him all the records. And this is about the second time that ever happened, and because we found 3 new radar sites. And another time that to digress here for a minute, we were flying in the East China Sea, and our pilot spotted a periscope just sticking up out of the water. Well, he buzzed in on it on our airplane, and we dropped our PDCs, practice depth charge, which is 1.8 pounds of explosive, and started doing echo ranging. And we caught a submarine right there in the water, sitting dead in the water. And he started up his engine, and it was a nuclear boat. And nuclear boats are notoriously noisy. They make all kinds of racket. And so I was busy recording that on the Julie, and so we got all the recordings of that. And this cotton picking submarine underwater, okay, he was submerged, started up his engines and just took off. and he outran our airplane. Because in order to maintain contact, we had to keep flying a 4-leaf clover pattern, and he was going just straight out, and we lost him because he just outran the airplane. We couldn't track him. So,
how fast would that be? How fast?
Well, we calculated from where we got some fixes, and the time he went this way and then turned right, and just an angle. And if he was going straight at top speed, he was doing approximately 70 knots underwater. Now a knot is 1.8 miles, 1.1 1/8 miles. So that's more than miles per hour. So he was going something like 70 nautical miles per hour underwater, and just flat out ran an airplane.
Good night.
And years later, at General Electric, I hired a guy that it was a retired Navy E9 Chief Petty Officer, and he was an electronic technician, and he was he was a chief of the boat, they call him, for submariners. And he was a real sharp guy. He did all kinds of crazy stuff. He had all kinds of stories about what he did, like in spying and clandestine work and all. And we were talking one day, and I told him about running into that submarine, because we found out that after we analyzed all the data we had recorded, that it was an American boat that outran us. And it was a hunter-killer submarine of our own variety. And we were met at the plane before we got off. Our commanding officer came out there and wanted all the recordings and all the records of that, because we had disturbed an HK sub on duty in the East China Sea. And made him change his location and what he had planned on doing. So anyway, I asked Bud Otteson, I told him that story, what I just told you, and I said, can those boats go that fast underwater, 70 knots? And he said, they can go faster than that. Can you imagine going 70, well, 70 times 1.125 would be about 90 miles an hour underwater. And he said they could go faster than that. Can you imagine a boat underwater going that fast? Anyway, and I said, well, that was about the time of the Thresher when it got sunk. And they said it was in so many 100 feet of water. And he said they could measure that in thousands of feet. He said the Thresher was a good sub that could really go deep. But, by the way, this chief had been in the Mariana Trench in a bathyscaphe, the diving ball that's on a cable. And the Mariana Trench is 38,000 feet deep. 38,000. You got that?